So my name is Petrisa Pecnik. I am the VP of Customer Success for BlueCat Networks. I am based out of Toronto, which is our headquarters. And just to give you a little bit of statistics on BlueCat itself, we have roughly 1,000 enterprise customers. We focus on the largest enterprises, Fortune 100s. However, we do have a substantial customer base in small and mid-market, so it is a varying type of customer base that we engage with. We have over 20,000 DNS servers and service points throughout the world. It is a global organization. We service countries in Asia, EMEA, as well as North America. We manage over 200 million IP addresses through the different infrastructures in our customer base. So they can range, and we'll go through statistics a little bit later from a couple of customers, but they can range from size anywhere from 2,000 IPs to 5.6 million IPs in a given customer. So varying size and scope. And we handle roughly 200 billion queries daily. The last stat I had seen was somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 terabytes worth of data goes through the system today on a monthly basis. So there's a lot of activity that we see in our customer base for DNS queries, DHCP, and our system for IPAM that manages it overall. BlueCat itself is focused on our customer engagement. And that's one of the reasons why I've been asked to present here. It's one of the areas that we really want to understand what our customers do, understand what their problems are, and ultimately how we engage with them differentiates us. Our NPS score is 57, and for those of you who ever studied NPS or know what NPS is, it's Net Promoter Score, and it's an indicator that we use across the business on how well we are doing and how well our customers would actively promote us to another organization. That translates into actual external communication. So we have asked our customers to externally rate us on forums such as Gartner, and they've done it 13 times more than any other DDI provider in the industry. Ultimately, from a business perspective, BlueCat has a very strong financial record, having 26 consecutive quarters with growth year over year. And so although we've only been in business since 2000, it's consecutively grown over time. BlueCat itself believes that DNS can do more in our customer base. It can do more simply because it is not the DNS of yesterday that everybody understands that we've had in the past. It's dynamic in the sense that it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and we've framed it up in what we're calling adaptive DNS. Adaptive DNS for BlueCat means 5 key cornerstones and pillars to how DNS operates. It's dynamic. Our customers change it all the time. It needs to react quickly, intensely, and ultimately as fast as the customer needs it to go. It's open in the sense that BlueCat is focused on API solutions so that our customers can do what they need rather than the old systems of the past. It's secure. There's more and more conversation going towards security, and a lot of the session that we'll go through later this afternoon is around cloud security specifically. But DNS is a platform that can be used for more than just the data, for more than just the query resolution. It's scalable. The BlueCat solution, as I said, can go anywhere from a small business all the way to a Fortune 100 that has a ton of DNS records and zones and complicated, and the complexity of that environment is significant. And automated. We're seeing a large push from our customer base to focus on automation to make simple business decisions easier and push the complexity that they have, simplify the complexity that they have out to their clients and their business units. Rather than having it centralized in the DDI group, it's now starting to be distributed out into the environment. BlueCat itself has, as I said, framed this up in what we call our DNS platform. And our product and solution offers our customers an ability to work through 3 key areas: intelligent networking, intelligent automation, and intelligent security. It allows our customers who are doing this on a regular basis to move compute around their hybrid networks without having to think about it. And so some of the demo that we'll go through later in the sessions will be around how our cloud automation strategy will allow you to do discovery into those kind of environments. The automation piece is, again, critical because our customers want to get their hands off the keyboard and deal with more complex and interesting issues than necessarily the types of activities that they had done in the past. It's uncompromising in that DNS is critical for the security inside an environment. it is now becoming evident, and I'm sure as we go through this, you'll see how critical it is for us to make sure that from a visibility standpoint, you understand and our customers understand what's going on in their environments overall and understand how to control it, apply policies, use tools in that realm to really understand and protect their own infrastructures. And it can integrate everywhere. DNS is no longer a solution that is on-premise or server-focused. With the explosion into cloud and the explosion into virtualization and containerization, it's now something that is critical for all of our customers to understand across their environment, not just in the on-premise and the way of the past. So Kevin and I are going to go through the complexity of DNS overall. And so what we've seen, and I've been with BlueCat for about 5 years, and we've seen that the complexity of the customer environments has shifted significantly. The business operations and businesses in general, they need to allow for rapid change in their environments. With the introduction and the expansion of compute and the way that the customers want to stand up infrastructure, stand it up, tear it down, redo it, they need resolution immediately. They can't wait for a change ticket in the way that it used to work in the past, and you would go through a process that might take 2 weeks. And so as a result, the complexity is getting more and more critical for our customers to manage. When they do those kind of activities and they want to have rapid change, our customers need to manage the security posture. They need to understand what they're allowing in their environment, who are they allowing to make those kind of changes, and how do they ensure that the right person has the right access to do what they're wanting to do. They're focused on increasing the reliability. And we'll talk about this as well. DNS is now being looked at as a service. It's no longer just a simple protocol that's used in the environment. Our customers tell us all the time that they have SLAs on uptime, that they are providing a service to their end customer, that they have to have 5.9 uptime just like any other service provider from their enterprise deliverables. They also have to control the costs. It would be great, especially from our business perspective, if they could spend tons and tons of money on this, but the reality is everybody's controlling cost. And so for a mission-critical service that has to have a 5.9 SLA, that still has to control cost for an organization, it becomes more critical for them to understand how they're using it and allow for rapid change. Ultimately, they want a DNS infrastructure that is simple. But the reality is DNS infrastructures aren't. They're difficult, and they're challenging, and they're unique. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about was how some of these things are unique. And so what we did and looked at was a number of different DNS environments. And how would an organization structure their DNS environment? This is an example for one of our largest retail customers. And in this example, you can see that they have centralized their DNS master in the middle, meaning their brains of the operation, for lack of a better set of terms. And they have standardized everything that they need to go out to every single one of their retail environments. And they're absolutely consistent in every one of their stores to have the same behavior for every customer that goes into that environment. They want no differentiation. And so we see this typically, as I said, this is specifically one of the largest retailers in the world, but we see this consistently across retail environments. This is an insurance organization. Very different model. But you can see from the graph and from the lines that are connecting between the bubbles, the complexity and the connections that exist from each one of these. The bubbles themselves represent BlueCat servers in this case. And you can see from the legend the type of roles that they may have. But what they have is still a somewhat centralized operation in the middle with the blue servers. And then they have a lot of complexity as they get out in terms of forwarding roles and, again, this mesh network that they've designed. But overall, it's still a very uniform environment. There are some outliers, as you can see, that they have disparate servers and disparate environments that were not part of the actual thing. So this activity helped this customer identify those kind of things and be able to clear it up so they could maintain a centralized system. This is another customer. This one is from a software organization. This one's very different. They've completely distributed their DNS out into their field locations. And they didn't want it centralized. which again, from the perspective of overall management and operations, this takes a lot more time to manage than the previous one. Because now you've put all of your DNS management out to your client base. And so it's a different model that every single customer uses. And then the last one that we have is a complete different mess. This one here for us epitomizes
I like this one.
the complexity.
I like this one because I make more money on it.
So BlueCat. Yeah. The complexity here is just, it's visible, right? We actually put in the bigger bubbles our BlueCat servers. Every other bubble
speaking
is a different provider. Like there's no consistency. And the only reason we put the BlueCat servers into this environment was actually to map out what they were doing. And it was sheer from an organizational standpoint. They actually didn't know that it looked this bad. They didn't know that this was the complexity. And your face says it all, right? Like,
it's a dream come true. It's a dream come true. It's a consulting gig for a year at least.
Oh, a few years.
It's a nightmare
for sure.
come alive. It's not a dream come true.
It is a monster.
Exactly.
And so it's a monster for a number of reasons. Monster for the customer who has to try to manage this. It's a monster for an organization like ours who was hired to come in and figure out what this is. And then they did bring in eventually consultants to try to map this out, and how do you even address this? Because you're not even sure where to start because of the complexity. And the reality is it doesn't matter if you're a large organization or a small to medium organization. If you don't have a handle on how your DNS has been configured and what your infrastructure looks like, this could exist on a smaller scale just as complex. And we've seen it. To give some background on BlueCat's customer base, we have customers in every type of industry. And we just selected 5 industries to kind of give a highlight on what BlueCat does in these industries. And these weren't necessarily the largest customers. These were just customers that, to be honest, I could get data from 24 hours before I stepped on a plane. So they were the ones that we mapped out. But what you can see and what's critical from here is the types of environments that you have. You can have a financial environment that has 5.2 million IP records, or close to 14,000, I think it's 13,600 and something, DNS zones that they try to manage. They make over 2.1 million API calls a week to manage that environment. And so that type of scale is something that BlueCat is known for, but it's also something that DNS just naturally can scale to, and it can scale to it reliably. One of the other shifts that we see very much so in the 5 years that I've been here at BlueCat has also been the number of users going in to make changes into the environments. It used to be very common in the past that DDI organizations and networking teams within a customer would keep their customer count or their users in this environment under 10. They wanted it to be auditable, they wanted visibility to it, they wanted to have control. Again, mission critical infrastructure, you don't necessarily get the wild, wild west. That has shifted substantially. And we always thought that the one client that we have, one of our bigger clients here in Silicon Valley, was kind of the wild, wild west of people because they made it a free-for-all. They let everybody in. And they had over 1,000 users in there updating the system a day. Any day, more than 1,000 users at any time could be doing a change. There were a lot of cross changes that were happening, a lot of complications.
Can I ask you, I'm not a working guy. I mean, I say this very often in these days, but I don't understand why somebody needs 3,500 zones to manage. I mean, I remember DNS as, you know, something that you can manage with less zones. I mean, why? Is there something,
Yeah.
a maniac? I don't know. It's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's multiple reasons, right? I mean, every zone can be used for a different business function, right? A different BU. Marketing, for example, is notorious for spinning up zones for different marketing campaigns, right? And you could have hundreds, depending on the type of organization, marketing campaigns going on at the same time, right? So you want different zones for that kind of stuff. In this case, I think you're referring to the higher education one. Again, when you think about, take a large university that has numerous schools of X, right? School, business school, health, medical schools, things of that nature. There's literally thousands of different zones that could be managed for those, and that just goes. It just adds to the complexity of DNS, and more so the complexity of managing that DNS at the speed that those businesses want to operate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You're right, though. It's definitely an explosion over DNS from yesterday.
I mean, BlueCat, we're obviously a DNS company, right? But every developer has their own zone that they can do work in. Every SA has their own work that they can do work in. And when you start to think about that and how you might use that or scale that out if you're a large software company, you're doing testing, it starts to get exponentially bigger. And then of course we also have people deploying all those same zones in the cloud, right, to support what they're doing on premises.
No, I get it. I mean, it's.
Some people implement a zone per site. So if you've got 500 sites where there's a manufacturing plant, you'll have, factory1.company.com and then factory2.company.com. And then in the old days, you would actually deploy a DNS server at that site to handle that zone. So there are reasons. It's largely historical, but as you said, sometimes it's now developers. Each one gets developer1.company.com.
Yeah.
Another big area we see it from is M&A activity, right? So as our world has turned into this merger and acquisition type environment, right? Instead of cleaning up DNS over the years and actually merging these companies, they just absorb them and bring them in and add those zones to their existing environments, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, so I'm also not a networking guy at all, and what kind of intrigues me here is what is an IPA call? Is that a DNS request or is that a change you're doing on the DNS infrastructure?
Could be both.
Okay.
Mostly the latter, right? So
Okay.
not necessarily a DNS call or a query per se or a response, but more making changes to DNS, right? Adding records, removing records, updating records, things of that nature.
And a lot of times those changes are in support of the other automation that you're doing. So as you're deploying workloads in the cloud or in a virtual environment or what have you, you want to have the DNS or IP changes happen simultaneously.
Makes sense, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to show an example of that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to walk through that. But again, the main driver for that, for the zones and all of that change, is our customers' appetite for business fault lines has changed. They can no longer have DNS incidents that take down all of the environment. They want to segment it based on business fault lines. So if they're going to have an incident, it's going to affect Bob on the 3rd floor and only the 3rd floor. It's not going to take everything down. And so we're seeing an explosion at that as well from a scalability and reliability perspective. As they're moving towards DNS as a service, they want to have that service up. The best way to guarantee that, or one of the options that they have to guarantee that, is get more granular at the record level and in the zones, and so that will help them protect themselves.
But sorry, if it's as a service, does it mean that you provide a service, not an appliance, on the premises of your customer?
So we do both.
Okay.
When I talk about it as DNS as a service, I'm talking about it from the enterprise perspective. So a large financial organization, they look at DNS within that organization as a service out to their clients. And so if you look at, for example, if we take a bank, one of the largest banks in North America, they've got a trading division. They have a securities division. They have their day-to-day banking division. They have a business division. All of these divisions all use DNS inside the enterprise. So the main people that own it, they own DNS for the entire enterprise, but they look at it as a service out to their end customers, which for them is their clients, is their different business units. Any other questions on this? So as we talked about a little bit briefly about the APIs and the automations that exist, the reality is our customers are doing hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of changes in a given day. And that can be everything from spinning up new compute to making changes to their fundamental zones and records. And that has also shifted the way they look at automation and the way they look at the APIs. So they're no longer just looking at it from the perspective of what we were driving automation for a couple of years ago, which was just make the task repeatable, make them so that they can't be fat-fingered in a way and protect yourself. But now the APIs are really starting to move towards business logic APIs. And so the sequence of events are there to service an activity that they want to do and that they want to do so it standardizes it. And so things like that include the life cycle of the actual DNS servers. So we have customers who will automate how they configure those servers so they have consistency across their environment. We'll have customers who will automate the way that they set up their infrastructure in their DNS and DHCP addressing space. So from consistency standpoint, it all looks the same. And so we're going to, so we have a product called BlueCat Gateway, and it does really two things. One is it allows our customer to have a web page UI to systematically simplify the way that customers can automate within their environment. And the focus of that is not only the web page, but more importantly, and what we're seeing customers really gear towards, is the RESTful API extensions that this allows them to do. So it's a holistic opportunity for them to automate business practice that they want in their environment. And we're going to go through a demo. So Kevin's going to walk you guys through a demo. It's a templated process that we have, and this is fairly standard that we see across, again, a bunch of different customers. And in this demo, it is really focused on the business logic to rapidly deploy a standard set of networks within the environment. So not having any sort of non-standard splits, not having any sort of non-standard options. It's to automate consistency and reliability within this. Within it, the demo itself, you're going to see that it's going to have standard naming conventions, so you don't have a lot of differences in an enterprise. It's going to have defined roles and options from a consistency standpoint. It's going to have reservations and configurations that you can set. And so if you do run a network, a networking area in the business, it can predefine certain things that you want within the network so that it doesn't become a free-for-all once it becomes available into your environment. Again, the gateway platform that we have, it's more about allowing for orchestration, so it's not just the platform itself, it's about the RESTful APIs and the ability to do what you need to do for your business.
So with that, I'll jump in again and kind of quickly walk you through this. I just want to tee it up a little bit, like put your mind in the, or put your thought process in the mind frame of, again, we want to provide self-service. We want to take those thousands of users that are making DNS changes and give this to BUs that they don't know what DNS is, they don't know what a host record is, they don't know what a network is, or what DHCP options are needed, or any of that kind of stuff, right? We just want to give them the ability to speed up their process. So if they're creating, let's just say, a ticket through some sort of a change management process or whatever it is, they go out to a website and fill in a request. We can then leverage backend APIs. And in this case, you'll see here, I've already imported a workflow here at the bottom called this template engine. Again, I've created out the XML files and built out all of the naming conventions and the overall consistent theme that we want for that network, the name, the size, the DHCP ranges, all that information. So when an end user or a customer within a BU just simply needs to spin up networks, for example, maybe it's a virtualization team and we're just going to carve out a block for them and let them create their own stuff. So in doing so, we can go in here and I'll show you, I've automatically gone out and created this block, this /16 here. You'll notice there's nothing under it, right? So instead of creating a request that sometimes takes weeks to get processed to go in and create 10 new networks, I can automate that process, and I'm not a programmer by any means, so I'm going to use Postman to show mine. But simply what I'm going to do is just a quick API call to authenticate, and then I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to call the actual script or the API call, which is going to create these 10 networks. It's going to give them names and all this additional information that we've kind of predefined in the XML file. So when I send that off and come back in, once this is done loading, you'll see that quickly I'm able to kind of go in. Let me re-drill down onto this. Now all of a sudden I have 10 very, very consistent networks. I can drill in. I can look at reservations. I can see I have predefined allocations. I have predefined DHCP ranges, deployment options for all these things consistently across that environment. So again, taking this completely out of the hands of a network administrator, going in and doing all these things and potentially fat-fingering these or not following naming conventions and things of that nature, a simple service desk request through a website can automatically make those calls based off of their inputs and go out and automatically create all these networks for them with that very, very consistent process. Again, giving our customers the ability to delegate that capability to their business units that need to do this and do it rapidly at the speed of business that they want to operate at versus waiting for some week-long change management process to occur.
So what's the control in this? Because that sounds really awesome if that's what the business wants, but it also sounds super dangerous. So what's the control from somebody going out and making all of these when that's not desired?
The control is, again, that's the beauty of API calls, right? We're taking the control away from users logging into an interface and giving them admin rights, and we're locking it down to an API call that can only do what it's allowed to do within that specific area, right? So we can lock down, again, if I go back up to this network, I can lock down access to this network based on role and scope security, who's allowed to do these things. So instead of giving 1,000 administrators actual access to go in and make all these changes and mess everything up, we lock that function down to a simple API call where a user fills out a web form and says, I need 200 networks, send me all the information when it's done. All they have to do is a simple form. They click submit. It can go through whatever change management process you want it to go through on the back end. Once it's approved, the API calls are made. No administrator has to go in and manually enter all this. The API calls themselves do it all for you, and it eliminates the risk of the fat fingering, the non-standard naming conventions, not following the company SOPs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So we're relying on the ticketing process.
It could be a ticketing process.
To not make it so that I can fill out a ticket and get 15.
Exactly. It could be something as simple as you're just filling out. This is something I'm going to show a little bit later, but it could be simply a matter of filling out information on a web form that they then submit. That goes into a ticketing system that then goes through whatever standard approvals need to happen to make sure that this is an allowable action and an approved business function. But then it kicks off and creates all those networks. Again, based on restrictive access to whatever it is that they're allowed to have, control to. So again, that specific block of networks I've given to, let's just say, that VM team, and they're going to go out and create those networks. But again, it eliminates all the human error. And
I get that. I think the thing that I'm asking about is it's so easy to do it that it seems like that could be a risk.
So the question here is, are you doing RBAC on the API calls? So like you have to authenticate to do an API call.
Absolutely.
And so you can create a user that says this particular network is locked down to this particular user. So you do have those levels of control.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look in here, I did very
wide
generically where I had a username and password. And that's when I had to run this to get my authentication token and stuff. But again, you would lock that down, and we could with RBAC, you can go out and say this is going to be for the VM team, or this is going to be for the marketing team, or this. So you could have that kind of functionality as well to see exactly who the role was, for which API user was making those calls, for example. But
now you're talking about enterprise DNS. So when you talk about RBAC, the natural next step to that is, can you tie into something like Active Directory? Can you do it based off group membership? Those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so LDAP, TACX standards.
But at the end of the day, it's automation, right? So it's as long as you have the permissions to do it, like any automation, it gives you the ability to screw up with incredible efficiency.
That's right. Anything, good or bad,
If you write it to do that, you can screw up at very high speed.
Or it's very easy.
So
We haven't talked a lot about security with the other, but this is like one of the security things. This is a point where, like, if that's that easy to do, if I figure out how to do it, and I'm a bad player, then...
Just like any other system, role-based access control has to be put around this. And you have to consider who your users are, what their needs are, and limit their access as much as possible.
Makes sense.
And while we're touching on it again, I'll just pull up. This is basically GitHub. This is where our BlueCat labs are stored. All of our workflows are available out there for down. And again, you can see there's numerous ones available depending on what those types of automation activities are going to be, right? So again, whether it's creating new locations or creating service requests or simply doing bulk imports and exports, things of that nature. Again, the idea is taking those daily repeatable processes that administrators used to have access to go do, to give that ability to end users from a self-service perspective, as well as from a consistency perspective, and taking out that human error risk.
And these are all open source, so that if you want to kind of make modifications to them for your environment, because every customer is different, even if they're not, they are. And the other thing that gives you the ability to do is tie some of these things together so that you can do more complicated actions.
Yeah, for sure.
A couple of qualification points here. So this is, you led with DNS, but this is a DDI solution really, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and is it fair to say then that we would look at this as a source of truth for automation?
Absolutely, yeah, and you'll see in later slides where we actually talk about, BlueCat as a single source of truth, right? Specifically those words.